to another RPG Day video. Today's word is forests, and I'm going to interpret that in a very literal sense and talk about forests. Now, forests can often be in your D&D games or your other fantasy tabletop role-playing games, can be overlooked, done very blandly, not very exciting. They are something that separates two locations on a map, and you're just like, yeah, you guys go through a forest. Maybe there's a random encounter with like an owl bear, but you can, if you want to really hype up the, high fantasy of D&D, because after all, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is, by the base standard rules, a high fantasy game. There's magic everywhere. Then you can make the forest a bit more magical and a bit more dangerous. So I'm going to be talking about three different ways to, make more interesting forests. Or rather, three more interesting forests that you can just transplant right into your world. But before I do that, really quick, I'm going to make a note about low magic D&D games, old school D&D games, and how forests in those games should be a lot more dangerous than your typical idea of forests in a 5th edition game. So if you're going old school, where there's low magic, things are a lot more deadly, things are a lot more realistic, you really want to show that forests are uncharted wilderness. If you've been to national parks and other sanctuaries like that, they actually are cleaned and monitored by the rangers for if trees fall, they remove it. If they clear away a lot of brush, and basically they're essentially very slightly manicured and kept. And that's been a practice that's happened far back in history of keeping a forest. But in a pure wilderness forest, there'll be a lot of fallen logs, a lot of brush. It's very hard to traverse. There are not very many natural pathways. And so in a low magic setting, traveling through kind of wilderness forest can be very difficult and deadly. Things you want to keep in mind are where is good clean water? Finding a river is like finding life source in the forest, right? You also want another interesting thing is don't just make them scavenge for food. Have them find something and be I don't know. Maybe they fail a scavenging roll and they find some mushrooms and they're just not sure if they're edible or not. And so it's well, they found food maybe, but it's then they have to decide, well, should we eat these? Should we not? And it's not just in regular 5th edition where it's Outlander's I found food, or the wizard is I can just make food, or the paladin's I'll just purify food. So there's a lot of workaways in the non-OSR D&D. But that being said, let's go back to high fantasy for a moment, talk about those three interesting forests you can transplant into your world. The first of which, the Vale. The Vale is a pine forest that is shrouded in a inexplicable mist. They don't know why. None of the people nearby, the locals, know anything more except that if you wander in there, there's a good chance you're not coming out. And the best way to transport this into your world is to have it immediately between the buffer between where the players are and where they need to go. So they need to get through the Vale, and it's to walk around is going to take too long. They have to go through. Basically, what they don't know is that the Vale is patrolled by a green dragon. And green dragons, in according to 5th edition, or just D&D rules in general, they like forests, and the area around their lair, their hunting grounds essentially, are permeated with a strange and magical mist. And so if you, have them come across signs the dragon is in this pine wood, and that there's mist, a lot of, I guess, people who read the 5th edition books are going to put it together, and then the excitement, the adventure of crossing the Vale is let's try and just avoid this green dragon. Obviously, if they're high enough level, I guess they might go hunting for the dragon, but usually low-level adventurers, you're going to be all right, we got to get out of here, there's a dragon, let's go, and then, if they come across it, you have a chase scene or whatever, and perhaps they have to find cover within, a giant fallen log that's crawling with bugs, or they go inside an old ruin and now have to escape through a dungeon. That's the Vale. Second one is the Giant Woods. Now, these are like redwood forest, except times 10. the trees are like skyscraper size, like in height, but also in width. All the fauna there is also similarly huge, and so the players traveling through this place, number one, it's going to take forever. Number two, they're going to encounter crazy monsters, just like giant moths, giant centipedes, giant squirrels, if you want to get kind of kooky with it. And a giant squirrel that's like massive, that could eat a human, sure, that could be dangerous. They could chew you up. Giant ravens could peck, they could just snatch up a human and fly away. So the giant woods is a very fun one as well, especially because of just the wacky kind of things you can come up with to inhabit it. And the third high fantasy forest for you to input is what I like to call the Dower Wood. Now, the Dower Wood has a history that the players probably do know because it's fabled about this Dower Wood. Or you could also roleplay that they don't. However, here's a history of the Dower Wood. It was once home to a tribe of, happy-go-lucky, plentiful, bountiful wood elves. And the wood elves lived here, were totally happy. Then they were struck or attacked by an outside invading force. You can make that custom for your world. In my world, it was these fascist industrialist dwarves called the Iron Cross that basically were trying to chop down the forest, right, to fuel their machines. Now, when the outside invading force invaded the wood, it wasn't called the Dower Wood at that point. The elves fought back but lost and were brutally and mercilessly slaughtered. So thousands of wood elf lives were lost in the forest, and in the high magic setting of D&D, that can change a place. That can have a toll on the land itself. And so those souls of those lost elves and those collective thousands of years of history between them and their tribe soaked into the wood, and it became the Dower Wood. And the wood itself became cursed, an accursed place. The trees became twisted and evil. The ground bears nothing but sour plants and nothing sweet, nothing good can grow there. And it is patrolled by and haunted by the spirits of those lost elves who seek vengeance on all mortals, but especially mortals who would disrespect nature or resemble the invading force in any way, pretty much. So these elves are mad with revenge, and they are ghost elves. You could use wraiths, you could use ghosts, you could use ghouls, just some sort of undead that just permeates this entire wood. And now the locals, maybe they know about the story, maybe they don't, but they're like, don't go into the Dower Wood because it is evil. It is a place of evil. But of course, because it's an adventure, the players have to go there. Perhaps there's a shrine somewhere in the Dower Wood they have to get to and get an accursed artifact or something like that, but they must venture forth. So, I've rambled for long enough, but here are those three interesting forests you can plug into your high fantasy D&D worlds. And again, I'll reiterate, they are the Vale, that mist-covered forest with a green dragon, the Giant Forest with massive skyscraper-sized trees and giant fauna, and the Dower Wood, a forest of dead trees and twisted plants haunted by the spirits of dead elves hell-bent on revenge against mortals. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Like and subscribe, please, and comment down below if you have a comment. See you in the next one.